Hello my good people, good morning. An early mixing tutorial for the funniest cover I've ever done. This is Quantum Flux by NORTHLANE. It was very fun to record the costume and outfit. I hope Jonathan notices. I think it's gonna be a fun time. I'm gonna wear it for Halloween tonight too, so that's gonna be epic. Let's talk tones. So Golfos is still around. This is a plugin I've been demoing on my mix bus. This is my master mix bus. And Golfos is basically an intelligent EQ. So here you're seeing it react to the noise floor on my music because some of my plugins have noise and it's all it's reacting to, but it's a good explanation of what it's doing. So when it's hearing noise, for example, you can tell it thinks it's very harsh in the 3K area, so it's ducking it down. It also believes it's lacking a lot of low end, so it's boosting it, and it's also giving it a nice shinier character at about 10K, 11K, 12K. But if you run music through it, you'll see it really react to everything. You can see it make some little decisions in the mid-range. You can see it also boost a bunch of subs while the kick is not hitting. When the kick hits, it's ducking him down, which is very interesting. And it's also always giving it that nice shine at 12K. Still trying this out, seeing if it does make everything sound better like it says on the label, but so far it's true. That is before my mix bus compression. Let's see how much. Just the usual, that's about 2 decibels on kick and snare hits. And the steel transformer option is giving us more saturation on the entire mix so that everything becomes a little bit more blurry and a little bit more bassy, which is very good. What was I gonna say? The nickel transformer I used to use before to give it a nice, very high-end boost on the cymbals and guitars. With Golfos doing it, I probably never have to use the nickel transformer for that again and just use the steel and iron for their low-end capabilities, which is pretty awesome. The multiband, this is kind of what I wanted to do. Golfos is, man, English is hard. I was using this multiband to do what Golfos is now doing, which is controlling the frequency areas that might be a little bit too harsh and boost just that, controlling the frequency areas that might be too big. So now let's see what it's doing after Golfos. You can see it's still helping my guitar mid-range, which I tend to make a little bit loud, and this helps me compress it. But it was compressing it too much, so I gave it a little bit less range to work with. Still a cool tool, but I might eventually drop it from my master bus. And then our limiter, let's see how hard we are working today. So that's as much as -6 on a big snare hit. The limiter is always working a little bit, which is what I'm aiming for. If you look at the gain reduction on the blue line, you can see it's always a little bit of it, and on kick and snare, it works harder. This is my guideline for limiting. This is about what I want the limiter work to look like. Release control 1, which is a little bit thicker on the transients than 2, which is very sharp, and a fast character. so that I get a faster release that distorts instead of a slower release that pumps the music, which is not nice in a technical metal. Sometimes it is. Drum sound. So this drum sound is the same drum sound I've built in the Get Good Drums P4 tutorial that I have on YouTube. So if you look up GGD P4 demo, you'll get a video of about 30 minutes or 20 where I explain this drum sound in its entirety. Basically everything stock as it comes on the library in terms of samples. And that's the sound I did on the YouTube video. There's just one extra step on the kick, snare, and toms that I will explain to you that I did. So after you watch that tutorial, consider this. On every one of the kick, snare, and toms, I added the following two tools: a transient designer into a limiter. So what I thought is that the drums on that tutorial worked well for that mix, and that meant they were very snappy in the high end. They had a lot of high end transient information. So the way I combated that was by using a transient designer just on the low end, so that every time the drum hits, there's a boost of low end. Like you can hopefully see there, and then run that into a limiter. The limiter will naturally take care of the peaks, but if you boost the low end into the limiter, it will make the low end fatter because it will distort too. So these two tools in tandem will help fatten your drums when they are too clicky. You can watch how I did it on the snare as well, focused on a little bit higher area on the snare. Oops. Now I'm going to play without these. It's lacking a lot of bass. It's a cool combination of tools after your usual processing. Run a transient designer into a limiter, which may sound counterintuitive, but it does have a cool sound. And that's that. That was all I added after the mixing tutorial on that video. So if you want to check out the drum sound in full, be sure to watch that. Let's move over to bass. All right, so since this is in F and I wanted it to be perfectly in tune, I used Eurobass. It's not the most realistic sounding thing, but it's pretty in tune. And what I wanted it was to be in tune more than anything else. In the verse, I use my real bass for dynamics. So, the bass, both of the basses are going through the same chain. This is the Will Putney amp simulator, and this is a bass tone that is called Nice and Tight. So you tell me. I think this is pretty nice and tight. Let's see what I corrected with EQ. I got rid of some subs beneath 45 Hz. I filtered all the clicky high end down to 3 kHz because I didn't need the extra stuff. And then I boosted the high end that I wanted to hear, which is the 1.5 mid-range area. There is also a cut at 2K where the bass was harsh and another boost at 1K. So let's see what the EQ does. Really helps us shape the mid-range of the attack of the bass. And you can also hear, which I forgot to tell, this 1.5 boost at 70. So very low stuff. This is a very cool bass EQ setting right there. Same philosophy, a limiter. Since this bass is very clean, there's going to be a lot of pick attack that we want to control. So you just tell the limiter, nothing is louder than this volume, please, and it's going to do it. Let's listen to it with the guitars. Hopefully you can hear as I unmute it that it's the life of the guitar tone, even without distortion. Let's talk guitars. So these are fresh strings on my Schecter 8 string, which I took this top string off to make my Ghetto Baritone 7, which is a very nice instrument. Those clean DIs are going straight into the Will Putney simulator. And this is just the amp 2, so the Bogner emulation, into cabinet 1. I'll switch them around so you can see what I was looking for in the tone. Any of the cabinets could have been cool with different EQ, but in the amps, the Bogner is the one that really has the low-mid presence I am looking for. It's a very, very fat amp in the best of ways. The EQ after it is very important, so this is where I'm EQing most of the tone. This filter up to 105, getting rid of all the stuff that needs to go to the bass, so this is a good low-end cleanup. What else is very important? These mid-range boosts, so that's 4 decibels at 1K. This is gonna give us that grind, and extra 1.5, well, at 1K again. That's very, very interesting. And then 3 dB boost at 10K, I believe, gives us a little bit of shine. Look at the before and after on this EQ. In the mix, it's way more obvious why you need it. These mid-range boosts are what's giving us guitar presence, basically. So check your 1K area if your guitars aren't cutting through. Very important lesson. And then again, a transient designer. What? If you watch the Reptile mixing tutorial, you know what this is doing. What this is doing is on breakdowns and parts where the guitar has silence, this makes the pick attack after that silence become stupid loud. So watch it act as it reaches the new notes. You can hear it go ka ka. And if I turn it off, the attack is just a little bit softer. Just an interesting trick. If you do put a transient designer on guitars with the right sensitivity, it's going to react to your pick attack when there's silence before it in a really, really cool way that helps the spaced out breakdowns really pop. Hopefully you can hear that the guitars really, really poke through when you're doing the scratches, for example. But if you turn it off, there's just a little bit less transient. It's a cool trick. Then we're going into guitar bus compression. This is to control the low end on palm mutes. So on the chorus, there's a couple of them. You can see when I hit that low F with a palm mute, you get a little bit of compression, where beforehand on open notes, you get basically nothing. And that is the guitar tone. That's 3 plugins, and honestly, you couldn't get rid of one. I love that part. All right, so the lo-fi guitars, they're all a bit different. So this one is the same main tone, but on the EQ, you just jack up the filters so that there's very little low end and very little high end. And then you do that like crazy on the post EQ. Check this one out. Very, very lo-fi. There's almost no high end on that. And this is a free widening plugin that's making it sound fake double tracked. So check this out on headphones or stereo speakers. Mono, wide. It just puts this on a different space than the kick and the snare without having to double track it. Very lazy of me. This one is the same, but without the widening plugin and with even less low end. And there's also the 5150 selected instead of the Bogner. Not sure why. Could have been the Bogner. And then there's a little lick before the breakdown. Which is the exact same thing as the other one. But there's actually no EQ after it. So it's just going into the plugin, and there's the filters on the plugin, and that's it. Okay. So let's talk about these wet leads. First things first, the amplifier. So this is on the Will Putney suite, the Mesa Boogie emulation, surprisingly, which is the first time I've used it, into Cabinet 4. I thought Cabinet 4 really had the mid-range I was looking for, and this Mesa Boogie amp had the treble that I was looking for. It's very, very trebly. The EQ is not very important. What is important is the pedals. So there's a boost going in, very basic stuff. But the reverb, you got 50% wetness, 4-second length, a bit of modulation, and filters. So that there is no low end on the reverb before 300 Hertz, which is just boomy shit. And there's nothing above 1.7 Hertz, which is just very shiny. That. I don't want that. Then into our favorite stereo delay. So H delay on ping pong mode, 8th notes with a little bit of modulation and some filtering. Sounds like this. More than the delay, which only really sounds on the end of phrases, this is meant to give us more stereo image. And there's a trick for that at the end too. EQ, let's just make it fit, get rid of all the low end rumble and annoying mid-range at 2K that belongs to the rhythm guitars. Basic stuff. Some dynamic whistling control. So this is the Brainworks refinement. And what it's doing, it's something similar to this. Basically selecting the annoying high-end frequencies and ducking them down, but it's doing it automatically so that I don't have to go around fishing for them. And I also don't statically remove them, but instead remove them as they come up. So here's a solo on what it's doing. And you can tell it's the hissy, high-end, whistly shit that I am removing 5 decibels of. And then this stereo plugin on Reaper, what it helps you do is it helps you get rid of the center image of a signal and just be left with the wide version of it. So first you need to duck the gain because it boosts your volume by 6 decibels because it's actually pretty broken. And then you get to play with your center level and your wide level. So wide stays at 0, but I remove the center so that it doesn't fight the bass and drums. Check this out. It's almost as if the pick attack on the center really gets quiet and all you hear is the big wide stuff. So this, if you're on Reaper, try this for your widening. Get rid of some center image on your signal. The chorus lead is the same, but with a very other important thing. And that is this octave pedal. So it's just the guy sounding like this. And then you run it into this to get a higher octave. It sounds terrible by itself, but as soon as you get the effects on, it's very nice to hear that higher octave. So that's why it's on a different track. Let's talk about this. So this is into the SS11X by Mercurial, a very clean sound. And just get rid of a lot of bass and a lot of mid-range to make it fit a mix. You can see with them ducked, it just makes it, well, it actually sounds cleaner. The low end isn't very logical on this sound. Reverb, let's go crazy. This is 16 seconds on 30% wetness with some modulation on. And no low end before 200 Hertz. Now we're cooking. Here's a very important one for this part because you need to hear the different rhythms bouncing. It's a quarter note delay. So listen for the repeats. I'll make them louder. This is what makes the part really work and shine through. It's the delay. Then an EQ, let's just make it fit the mix. There's a filter on the low end at 120 Hertz. We're removing a lot of 300. That sounded pretty boxy. A little bit less mid-range. The 2K region, that is going to let the lo-fi guitar shine through. Also the piano that we're going to discuss later, and cutting the really high-end tappy stuff when I hit the fretboard at around 6K. Then into some compression. That's it. This is very tightly compressing the clean sound with the effects that come after it. There's also a limiter automated so that I can turn it on and make it very loud when the last chorus hits. It does sound pretty bad, but against the entirety of the mix, you need it to turn on. This is the way to get it loud enough. The clean on the verses is basically the same thing, except there's going to be less reverb, so 4 seconds at 25% mix, and the delay is going to be 16th notes for some different rhythms. Other than that, it's the same SS11X sound. And this delay here is the same thing, but with a very specific 8th note dotted delay. And a very high feedback of 85 to keep these notes going. It's an important part of the verse. Speaking of filling out this verse, there's a very, very quiet choir section. So that's what it sounds like out of my synth. Expand 2 with the A choir. It sounded very, very shiny for a quiet part. So we hit it with some EQ. And now it's like it's just men singing in a very quiet dynamic. If I take it off, it just sounds a bit too empty. All right, now let's talk this piano. This is a very interesting sound. So this is the Addictive Keys piano on the ambient setting. Very standard stuff. By the way, like I've explained, I got this plugin for free with my Focusrite interface. So if you have a Scarlett, check the code inside the box. I had this there, which is very good. Into the MV2. So this is a limiter that's working in the opposite direction. So it's giving me more of the low level stuff. So the high, not frequency, volume. The high volume parts like the attack are the same volume, but then it's going to bring up the sustain of the note. This is so that it becomes a little bit longer on every note. And then, of course, you know what it is? 16-second reverb, 60% mix. Nice. That reverb was a bit too boomy in the low end, even with a low cut up to 300 Hertz. So there's getting rid of more. And also the mid-range at 700 was very airy, very breathy. This makes it nice and thin. And then this is my favorite tremolo that I have on here. I haven't bought a good tremolo plugin. This is the Waves Guitar Suite, just like that other pedal I showed you, the Octaver on the leads. And it has a really good tremolo. You sync it to 16th notes. You decide how much. And you can even chorus it up. There's also shapes. And that's how you get that piano sound. The lo-fi drums, I printed the drums from the main drum programming. So they sound very big. And then I affected them with this. Let's explain this bit by bit. This is the first EQ, just making sure we get rid of some kick drum and we get rid of a bunch of cymbals. All right, so it sounds softer. Now into the saturation, a free saturation plugin from Softtube. This sounds really, really cool. So you can hear it distort and become very big, but we don't want it to become big. So the EQ after that gets rid of the bigness and just leaves us with the distortion. So a very drastic low cut at 300 and a very drastic high cut at 400, as well as less 6 dB of gain, because this boosts your gain a lot. The before and after is. Be sure to EQ before your distortion and after your distortion when you're trying to get these lo-fi effects, because EQing before the distortion can be very important to make sure you don't overly distort the cymbals and make it annoying, or on guitars too. And that is basically that. Here's some cool effects. There's a snare reverse on the breakdown. The way I did this is I printed a snare sample of this kit that sounds like this. And then I reversed it and it becomes a perfect reverse into the snare of the kit. Very cool. So that's a nice trick for you. If your reverses don't sound anything like your snare, just print your snare and reverse it. It's got to sound perfect. And then my usual explosion sound with the reversed sound before it to enter the last chorus. Like this. And that's everything, guys. Thank you for watching this mixing tutorial. I hope you enjoyed the cover. I tried to make it very, very fun for Halloween. And that's it. Have a nice day and thank you for your support.